Hi all, welcome to this little short video just talking about exam papers. Now, some of you have asked recently why I've taken a few videos off my channel. The main reason for that is that I've done some paper reviews and talking for exam papers recently, which are papers that are more likely to be used by centres because of COVID cancelling exams and exam papers being replaced. So what I've done is I've removed them from my channel because I don't think it's fair to have a video with the papers and the answers that could be given to some of you as part of your final assessed grade. What I've got here instead is an exam paper I've created. It's one I wrote a few years ago to use in my classes. It follows the exam format, template, structure, more or less. A few things I'm going to flag up with it as we go. But I thought I'd talk through some exam skills, give you some example answers, just as a way of helping with your prep. So what we've got here is a question paper. There's 3 sections to it. I haven't done 4. So you've got A, B and C in the same way that your exam paper would look normally. Now, the first section here, I've got safeguarding vulnerable adults. That wouldn't be what the first section of the exam paper is. Scenario 1 is always ill health. But with this question that we're looking at, it's about learning disabilities and supporting people with learning disabilities. So actually, this question would be scenario 2 about supporting people with learning disabilities. So slightly sort of few issues of how I created the paper, but more or less we can use it the same way we go. So we'll look at the case study, we'll look at the context, and then we'll look at the 4 questions in this section. Now, for this, you would normally give yourself 20 minutes to do this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set myself a timer and keep an eye on the time so I can see how long I've got left to work on this question. So I'm going to start in now as we begin reading. Peter has begun recently working at a residential care home called Somerville House. Somerville House is a residential care home for adults with severe learning disabilities. Peter has been a senior care assistant for 5 years and has recently taken up a new position working in the care home's most secure ward. For patients with the highest needs, he has been working with patients with the highest learning needs and has witnessed a number of interactions between staff and patients that's concerned him. Peter is worried that the patients in the home are victims of systematic and ongoing abuse by the staff. Peter has observed a number of staff and senior staff participating in the abuse. Peter's concerned for the safety of the patients and raises concerns with managerial staff who run the home. Peter does not receive a response and takes his concerns outside the company. So this is all about whistleblowing complaints. And if it sounds familiar, this is based on the Winterbourne View house case study that gets used quite frequently as part of care values. So let's take a look at our questions. Question 1 says, identify 2 organisations Peter could contact when senior staff at the home do not respond to his concerns. So for a question like this, a 2 marker, which is always identify 2 organisations, 2 roles, responsibilities, 2 people, 2 professionals, 2 ways. We just need to, as the question says, identify. So we just need to give the facts. So who would Peter contact if the managers did not respond? So it's quite a few people he could go to. He could go to the CQC if the managers at the home do not respond. He could contact his professional body / union. So in this case, it would be maybe the NMC or the HCPC, depending on his role. If he was concerned, he could go to the NHS Trust, go to the police, a charity. So the idea being that you could go to a number of organisations, number of bodies. Now, we'll take my first 2. I'll put them in yellow because we've got to get those checked and marked at the end. So we've got the HCPC and a union. That's all you need to do. List them off. So looking at a time, we are 2 minutes in with 2 marks down. So question 2B, or 1B, sorry. Scroll down a little bit more. So describe 2 responsibilities of the staff of a residential home as providers of care for patients with learning disabilities. So again, we're laying what are the responsibilities. Now with a 4 mark like this, it's almost like a 1 + 1, but we're doing that twice. So it's like, 1 + 1 and then 1 + 1. We need to give our points. So for our first 1 + 1, if we're looking at this, we could give a point and then briefly add a little bit more detail. So staff would need to maintain the safety. Spell it. Of the patients by completing regular risk assessments and ensuring the environment is suitable for their needs. There we go. That's one thing ticked off. So need to maintain safety and make sure the environment's safe. Our second 1+1 would be to ensure, spell it right, ensure the patient's rights are respected, and all staff have completed training such as equality, diversity, safeguarding, to fix the typos, to help ensure the patients are protected. Again, we've given a reason, so staff have to complete ensure patients, all staff have to complete training to G&D, and obviously make sure their CPD is up to date. So we've given our two reasons. Again, point and then explanation. Now 1C, get there, is this question here. So it says, explain what evidence or information should inspectors look at when monitoring the staff and standards of care being provided at home. So when the CQC go in, they conduct an inspection, they look at all aspects of a care setting, and they're making a judgment about, is it safe, is it meeting the patient's needs, are they practicing appropriately, is everyone trained? So these are the things that the CQC would want to look at. Now with a 6 marker, the general pattern, I would say, is again, is this 1+1, 1+1, 1+1. But the example, you could go another way by giving like a 1+2. So you give a point and then you give 2 or a longer explanation of what it is. But 1+1 I think is easier. 3 points with 3 bits of detail. So let's put some ideas down. So we could say, what would the CQC look for? They may want to review all records such as accident or incident logs to see how frequently issues occur. So that could be one thing they want to look at. So they want to look at records, and we identified records, 1+1. They may wish to speak to staff and patients, and check their training and CPD to date. So again, they want to speak to staff and what they're going to be looking for. They may want to observe patients and how they behave around staff, try and spot any signs or issues. So again, it might be they want to observe the patients, they may want to look at them. Now if we're not confident, so again with our first one here, if I'm not confident about observing the patient, I'm not feeling great about that one, if you're ever in that position, throw a 4th one in. There's no harm in putting an extra point in if you've got the time to spare. I've got 12 minutes left to work on this question. I've got an extra minute, so I might want to say that the inspectors may want to look at the complaints process and check whether there have been complaints and if these have been dealt with. So as I say, I'm not confident about my third one. You can throw a fourth one in. The examiner's going to look at all of them. If this one is wrong, if it isn't a great one, there it can, it wouldn't get a mark. But then you've got this extra one here that kind of covers you if you're ever unsure. And last but not least, 1D. And we have at this point 10 minutes remaining, so we're over a little bit at a time. So discuss what action should be taken by senior managers and the regulator to ensure these incidents of abuse never occur again. So if we want to put ourselves in the position of an inspector or regulator, how are we going to stop this and make sure it never happens again? Now, general guidance here for an 8 marker is, try and give 4 points with some detail. So 4 kind of explanations, 4 issues, 4 points, and explain what's going on. You could give more, slightly shorter points. Again, think about those you're trying to give about 8 marks, 8 things in your answer to pick up those marks. You may want to balance out ideas. So if we're going to think about this position, what could we do to stop abuse? So one thing we do is to remove all current staff involved in abuse and replace them with new staff who will be trained on providing we could go a little further and say staff would have to complete an induction process and complete training on, I'm going to put E and D, so equality and diversity / safeguarding. So remove the staff, replace them, and make sure that the replacements are trained. Inspectors, or could put install CCTV in all common / communal areas. This would record and reduce incidents of abuse. However, we could put a balance in here, could move abuse into private places where it is not seen, so it kind of hides it even further. We could talk about fitting or ensuring there is a clear complaints process which has to be responded to within a set time. And we could talk about how this could be open to all staff and patients, and then put externally monitored. So that's kind of what the CQC does when they go in and do an inspection. They monitor these ideas complaints. So if we're trying to reduce this, we've got rid of staff, we've put CCTV in, we're making sure complaints processes are put in place. We could, thinking about other things we could do, is maybe make sure all patients know their rights and have options or ways of making or raising concerns. That's what we've just done, but we could also put increase transparency and inform parents / family of progress and any issues or incidents. So again, the idea about family being updated more regularly. And there we go. So there we have 4 points that we've made about this setting. So let's take a look at the marking scheme. We'll go through our answers and check those off. So the first one we said, who would you contact? Who would you call if you had a concern? We said CQC and their professional bodies. So CQC, top of that list there. And professional bodies. Oh, yep, there we go. NMC, HC, PC. There we go. Perfect. Other groups we could contact, the press and the media. Public Health England. We said NHS Trust, we could council, the police, and the personal and public involvement group, the PPI group. So not the kind of the claim you can make if you owe PPI, but this is a group who monitor healthcare settings. Obviously you find them a bit like a CQC, they inspect and they monitor progress, but it's kind of informal and it's more like a neighbourhood watch almost style of observations and inspections. Our golden ticket in all these exams is always the accept any other valid response. If that's there, and it always is, as long as you've made a point that is clear, relevant, somewhat sane, you can pick up the marks for that. Okay, question 1B. Now we said it was a 1+1 style. We need to make a point and develop it. 2 clear points. And again, some of the answers here about what the responsibilities of the staff would be is to conduct risk assessments, which we've kind of, we've talked about risk assessments and maintaining safety. We've got about patients' rights. Are they being, is that on the list? So follow policy and staff guides. We've got follows in policies. We've got resident enrichment education, safe and secure living, support medication and daily tasks, offering training to promote independence, accurately recording information, engage staff in regular training and development. There we go. And update family events. So we've kind of got the last one here. Now, as I said, that extra point, any valid response would really be our saviour, but it's kind of, we've got the same idea, we've just worded it differently, which is absolutely fine. For 1C, our 6 marker, I'm not sure what's going on there. There we go, that's better. So for 1C, our 6 marker, we're talking about what are the responsibilities of staff and professionals. So we said about recording accidents and incidents. So meeting occupational standards, sufficient numbers of staff, ensuring staff are trained. There we go. So we said that about making sure staff are trained and CPD is up to date. Safeguard and awareness training is appropriate. Observing the patient. So we did have observed patients. That's one we were unsure about. That's easy on here in different ways. Review incident accident logs. Yep, we've got that one here. Check for internal and external complaints. So yeah, is the complaints process being checked? CCTV, fan review. So actually, looking at all 4 of our responses, they're all fine. As I said, because it is a 6-mark question, you've put 4 points, which are all correct. You're not going to get more than 6 marks, but it just, as I said, it covered you. If this one had been wrong, and it wasn't there, then the other 3 would have ensured we got all 6. And last but not least, 1D. So this was the question about what would you do? How could you prevent this happening in the future? So we talked about removing staff, installing CCTV, ensuring there was a complaints process that was kept in place, and patients know their rights. And what we've got on our list here: provide staff with full training and ensure that they in training is provided. Suspend and terminate any staff involved in abuse. All staff have to undergo regular CPD and professional training. So we've kind of touched on that in our first point. Increase the frequency of unannounced inspections, clear whistleblowing. So we could have extended our complaints process. Care home must respond. We've kind of touched on that. CCTV, we've done that. How have we talked about how it could displace offences? Raise awareness of issues with new staff and keep families updated, which is kind of we've got on that transparency side. So we have got 4 points with explanations answering the question, and obviously each one of them we could develop these a little bit better. So looking at the marking grid, one of the things here, it says that top band answers demonstrates accurate and thorough knowledge and understanding of relevant information. So I'd say we've got quite good information here. We've kind of talked about the CQC, we've talked about CCTV. We could expand on it, talking about more specific responsibilities, more specific ways of maintaining and protecting patients. Well-developed and balanced discussions demonstrating a thorough grasp of competing arguments, pros and cons in context. So we've talked about what should be done. We've got a few problems. We could extend this further by saying how these things would help, or the problems of putting some of these things in place. So there are some areas here we could make a little bit better. And then lastly, logical reasoning and evidence throughout response, which is clear and uses specialist technical language. So again, we've talked about equality and diversity, safeguarding, the CQC. There's a few more bits we could use, a bit more terminology, but as I say, probably would be a good response in this rough bare bones answer here. Okay, so there we go. So that's our first 4 questions covered and reviewed. So what we'll do is very quickly we'll move on to the second set of questions again. So section B here, which is about alcohol abuse. Now, as I said before, this doesn't fit the scenarios neatly from the exam paper. So as I said at the time I made this, it doesn't perfectly fit. This question, which is all about alcohol abuse, would be more likely to fit ill health. This would be where it fits really neatly. I'm talking about alcohol abuse. So let's take a look at the context, the scenario of what we're doing here. So we've got Spencer, who's 32 and has previously had periods of alcohol addiction. He has been drink-free for the past few years, and in recent months he did not receive a promotion that he wanted. This resulted in him drinking heavily again. Following this, his relationship's broken down. He's left home and is now living away from his family in a sort of temporary accommodation provided by the council. He's been spending lots of time with someone called Lacey, who's also an alcoholic. He's engaging in a number of risky behaviours due to drinking and has been admitted to A&E 4 times in the past 10 days. And he's refused help on each occasion, discharging himself from hospital. So there's that situation. Let's hit each question as we did before, thinking about what we would say. So the first one says, identify 2 health conditions that Spencer might develop if he continues to drink at this level. So we're going straight in with just 2 points. So one thing, if you're drinking heavily, this could increase the risk. Throat, stomach, or bowel, even liver as well. Put that one on here. Stomach. We could also put increased blood pressure. Increasing risk of strokes. Okay, there we go. So 2 health conditions straight off the bat. To be or not to be. looking here, it says describe 2 services that Spencer could access to support him with his heavy drinking and outline briefly what they would do. So as we said before, this is our 1 + 1, 1 + 1. We need to identify a health provider or support and what that support could do. So for example, Spencer might contact his GP. The role of GP would be to assess his health and monitor issues such as blood pressure, diabetes, and possibly refer onto other settings such as rehab. So there we go, we've got one service, the GP, and what they could do to help. A second service, we could maybe look at, let's go with maybe say counselling. So another service that could access to support him. So again, if you went to counselling, this could provide Spencer with support for his mental health. Maybe look at drinking and finding other ways to manage it, or manage or deal with stress. So there we go, we've got a support agency and what they do, our 1 + 1. And we're doing really well for time here, we're getting on really well with this question. So 2C, explain what risky behaviours he might engage in. So if Spencer is drinking heavily, what risky behaviour could he engage in? As before, this is our 1 + 1, 1 + 1, 1 + 1. So if we were drinking heavily, if Spencer's drinking heavily, what could he do? So he might engage in poor lifestyle choices, such as smoking, he's already drinking, smoking, poor diet, and maybe possible drug use. So that's one thing, poor lifestyle and what that would mean. He may make poor decisions, such as having unprotected sex. The impact there, this could cause STIs or even unwanted pregnancy. Again, another possible risk, another risky behaviour. Spencer could engage in criminal activities as violence or shoplifting due to drinking. So again, nice and easy, criminal. If you were ever unsure, it could be you could have had a third. So Spencer is more likely to be of becoming homeless or sleeping rough when drinking. So if you're never ever unsure about one of the points, throw an extra one in, only just to kind of give you that little cushion if you're worried about it. And last but not least, question 2D. So discuss what action the different agencies can take to support Spencer in his recovery from alcohol abuse. So we've already touched on some of this already, so we could steal some ideas from earlier. We might just have to expand them and develop them. So GP already mentioned, assess health, monitor health issues like blood pressure, check for diabetes, refer to settings. GP can also monitor his liver health and check for signs of liver failure. When it comes to counselling, we said about helping him look at his mental health, look at causes of his drinking, could encourage maybe family counselling to gain support from family members. So we've kind of taken two ideas already had, extended, but that's covered 2 points with explanation. We could look at social worker, just council staff, could re-house Spencer to a more permanent home, which would reduce the risk of associating with other alcoholics. So again, maybe putting him in a more temporary, more suitable home, that would be beneficial. Now again, we kind of think about the pros and cons here. So one thing we do know about Spencer, however, Spencer has previously rejected medical support, not work. However, Spencer's family live far away. Kind of retrospectively going back and adding in some negatives. However, due to his relationship, Spencer may return to this area, to his relationship with Lacey. So again, we've got GP, we've got counselling, we've got social worker, looking for more permanent housing. Maybe we could look at community support. Encourage Spencer to join an A group and get additional support from this charity. I'm going to change that to charity support. There we go. They would provide a sponsor to give unofficial support and guidance. There we go. So we've given 4 different supports, 4 different agencies, with an explanation of what each would do. We've also kind of considered the problems, the issues that could come about by providing this support. So last but not least, the last thing for us to do is just take a look at the marking grid. So the first question is, what were the health concerns? So we said increased risk of cancers such as throat, stomach, liver or bowel, which is on the list, yes. Increased blood pressure and risk of stroke. So on the list here, we've got high blood pressure. It doesn't mention strokes, but strokes would be associated with high blood pressure. Some of the other issues, we've got inflamed liver, liver failure or liver damage, liver scarring, which is cirrhosis. We have got heart disease and cardiovascular problems, pancreatitis, increased risk of seizures and anxiety. Now, again, as we said before, any other valid response. If you're aware of any other health condition that comes about as a result of heavy drinking, that would absolutely be fine. If it's not on the list, doesn't matter, as long as it's accurate and correct. So you may have put, if you put increased risk of diabetes, which is associated with drinking, that would be fine, even though it's not on the list. It's a realistic, valid response. For 2B, we're looking at who would provide support. Now we said about who would help, we've got our GP, we've got counselling, so we've got counselling services on here. We have got general practitioner, GP, and we've explained how. You've got the council regarding housing. AA would be the support. We've already used them for 2D. Counselling services, which we've talked about, A&E and NHS choices. So again, we've got our point and an explanation. For 2C, this is our free risky behaviours. Now we were, as I said, if we were unsure about one, then we could put a fourth in just to protect ourselves. Looking at our list here, we said about poor life choices, smoking, poor diet, drugs. That's already, well, those are 3 separate points. We've covered all of those. Poor decisions and unprotected sex. So yeah, STIs, unwanted pregnancy. We didn't cover domestic violence. That's a risk. We've got violence and shoplifting, so we've covered that under crime. Self-harm, yeah, if we could have talked about mental health. Again, the risk of sleeping rough, becoming homeless, isn't on the list, but again, would be a valid response. And last but not least, 2D. So this was looking at who would support him, who would provide support. We've talked about this. We've got our GP. We said what they would do, and we've balanced it out with howevers at each point. Some of the other suggested support: occupational health, that you would receive through employment. So the fact he could still be employed, we could look at occupational health. Detox support units, intensive rehabilitation, family therapies, online forums we didn't touch on. Charities, we've kind of got charities with AA, friends and family. So again, as always, as long as you've made a point, you've explained the role, the purpose, how it's helping, that's the main thing here. And there we have it. That's our first 2 questions covered. I have got a third question, which I'll look at in a separate video with you all, and I'll just talk about the answers for that. As always, I hope this has been of some help. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe, tell your friends, and as I said before, once the exams and the tags and everything sorted out, I will repost those original videos which I've currently removed just because of the exams taking place. So as always, thanks for watching, and I hope this has helped.